Hello everyone, I am the Polish Apple, and this is the process video for my latest poster. And this one has kind of a weird concept. One day, out of nowhere, the idea popped into my head, what if Smokey the Bear was an arsonist? And now, here we are. I wanted Smokey to be kind of top heavy, so here I'm bulking out the top of my reference photo, but I wasn't liking how it was looking. So I'm isolating the arms to give me a little more control with the shape of Smokey's upper body. Puffing the chest out and then reconnecting the arms so it looks a little more natural. Then I take a copy of the reference photo's head and resize it to more closely resemble the proportions of a grizzly bear, before cleaning up the outline of the reference to avoid any later confusion. After the reference is at a place I'm happy with, I drop in the pants that I'll be using and cut them out. After that, I use Photoshop's Content Aware fill to fix the spots where the hands overlap the jeans. The jeans are all done, so now we'll start on Smokey himself. And this process took me longer than I'd like to admit, since initially I struggled to figure out which pieces of which bears I wanted to mash together to create a complete character. As you'll see, it took me a few attempts and it looks really weird in the beginning. I eventually found the arm that I'd be using and was able to start on the rest of Smokey, starting with his body. I ended up choosing this head for Smokey because I thought the scar across the snout really added to the story I was trying to tell. I eventually threw up a reference illustration of Smokey the Bear to kind of go along with. And because this was supposed to be a more sinister and intimidating version of Smokey, I pulled in a picture of Jason Voorhees as inspiration. After Smokey had been Frankenstein together, I started going around the edges and cutting the fur off so that I could completely remove the background from each piece. Since just shaving Smokey smooth, say that 5 times fast, would look really weird, I ended up making a fur brush to add back all the furry edges I had lost. This took some trial and error, but it was definitely the right way to go. I realized the fur edges that I had painted on looked a little harsh, so I went around and blended all the inner edges and blurred all of the outer edges. He's still unfinished, but at this point, you can see where it's going. Smokey is starting to come together. I moved on to where his body meets his pants and started on that lower edge, trying my best to make it look like Smokey is actually wearing the jeans. I added a richer blue to his jeans to get it close to that classic smoky blue jeans color before I moved back up his body to give him some shoulders. After his shoulders were in place, I moved to trimming around his fuzzy little head, and then started the refurring process. At this point, we've got a strong silhouette, but he's still missing his little toesies, even though later in the video, you won't even be able to see his feet at all. Smokey is, for all intents and purposes, finished. But at this point, he just looks like some random bear wearing pants instead of specifically Smokey the Bear. So now we need to give him the rest of his iconic getup. On that note, we're going to start with the belt buckle. I found this really nice vintage looking belt buckle, and I'm going to use this chunky font for the letters. First, I cut the belt buckle out of its tiny white background and then duplicate it twice so I can lengthen it. I then position and erase parts of the middle one to turn it into a single, longer belt buckle, and then resize and position the whole thing. After I have the belt buckle in place, I start on making the letters look like they're molded onto the buckle by adding a bevel and emboss layer to it, tweaking it until I have something I like the look of. I then add a yellow layer on top to give it a gold color before moving on to the belt itself. After the belt is under the loops, I shade the belt to blend it in. Now for the hat. I didn't want Smokey's ears folded under his hat like they usually are. Instead, I wanted to make cutouts in the brim of the hat for his ears to fit through. Once the ear holes are finished on the hat, I shade in Smokey's head so it doesn't look like his hat is floating in front of his face. While I wanted his head to be shaded, I still wanted his face super visible, so I erased the shadow around his eyes and snout. I then finished off Smokey's hat by adding his name to the hat band and blending it in. Since Smokey is supposed to be starting a forest fire, I decided that he needed a bright red gas can in one of his paws, so I dropped one in, cut it out of the background, and positioned it under his paw. Without giving my realistic Smokey the Bear weird human hands, I had to figure out how to make it look like he was holding the gas canister. My solution was to chop off these 3 toes and make it look like they were bent under the handle. Of course, using the fur brush again to blend it in. After the claws are made to look bent under, I found these claw marks and made it look like his 2 remaining claws had sliced into the can. I warped the claw marks and blended them in, and after shading the jeans underneath the gas canister, that part was done. In Smokey's other hand, I tried both a shovel and a lighter, but couldn't get either looking the way I wanted. I ultimately scrapped both ideas, so let's just skip ahead. Jumping forward, I wanted Smokey to look a little bit more like his classic self, so I lightened up his snout and changed the color a bit. This next part is going to go by super quick because I didn't end up using any of it, but I originally wanted a campground and RV behind Smokey with a cabin in the distance on a hill, with everything on fire. But it ended up looking weird, so I scrapped it, and looking at the final result, I'm really glad I did. I also wanted a couple of dead campers behind Smokey, but I also scrapped that idea. Here's the part of the video where I start trying to fit the pieces together, but as you watch, I'm pretty sure you can physically feel how much I dislike the direction this is going. So, after I tried to amalgamate some sort of cohesive background together for about half an hour, I realized that a while back, I personally took a photo that would be the perfect background of the piece. This is one of my favorite nature photos, and it's simple enough that I have a lot of creative freedom as far as editing it. I then threw a frame onto the poster so that I could later put a version of the famous "Only You" slogan at the bottom. I started cutting out specific trees to more easily add fire onto them, and after the trees are cut out, I start adding fire and smoke into the poster. And don't worry, it's gonna look weird for a minute while I figure out how I want the fire to look. After the fire is more or less in place, I start shading Smokey in, lighting the edge of the character and adding layers until it looks right. After Smokey is shaded, I start adding embers on all the trees underneath the flames, making the trees look more like they're burning, and then I add a little glow to the flames and behind Smokey. The fire is mostly finished, so I start adding texture around the frame, starting with an old paper texture and a thin line border around the edge. I start messing around with the typography, eventually taking inspiration from the typography on this poster, but I'll finalize the colors later. I wasn't happy that you could barely read Smokey's belt buckle, so I darkened the letters to make it easier to read. I wanted the frame of the poster to have more texture, so here you can see me playing with that a bit, but eventually I go with kind of a sooty grunge texture. Also, the blockbuster colors around the frame were not the final colors. After the slogan is finished, I start doing my final edits on the background because I wasn't happy with how dim the fire was, so I added a layer above the whole thing to brighten up the fire. I shade the top of the picture to add a little more interest, and after a few more tweaks here and there, we're done. here's the final piece. And after all the work I put into it, I'm very happy with how it came out, especially being able to use one of my favorite photos as the background. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more of my shenanigans, both gaming and creative, subscribe, as I hope to put out videos regularly. I've been the Polish Apple, and I'll see you in the next one.